Welcome to the National Women's Fitness Academy podcast. We're here to talk about women's health, female hormones, body image, and all things health and fitness.
Hello, girls, and welcome back to another episode of the Women's Fitness Academy's podcast. I'm your host, Siggy, one of the WFA's educators and a women's body image and fitness coach. Today, I'm chatting with the lovely Darcie, who's a nutritionist supporting women in breaking free of binge restrict cycles and finding food and body freedom. Darcie, thank you so much for joining me. I really want to open this conversation up with, when did you hit that breaking point in your journey of binge eating cycle?
Thank you so much for having me, Sig. I guess my first breaking point, I think I had kind of multiple along the way, little epiphanies, how problematic my relationship with food was and how much binging was getting in the way of me eating healthily, which was something that I desired a lot. But it was very masked by just wanting to be in a smaller body and the pressures of diet culture and all that. So I think the first breaking point was when I think it would have lasted months, but I was eating a block of choc a day on the way home from work in a job that I just did not enjoy. And I realized that it was just so not aligned with where I wanted to be, how I wanted to act and how I wanted to treat my body. So I think at that point was when kind of clean eating, obsessive over healthy eating, and really manipulating my body to be in the smallest it could was probably my first breaking point. However, that just transitioned to other unhealthy behaviors. So that was point one. And then I think point two was when I first started going out on my own and helping people eat healthily. And I was doing meal plans and I was just kind of clients still got value out of working with me, and I could see that and progress, but it was very disempowering, very unfulfilling. And then I stumbled across intuitive eating, which is the space I work in now. And that really was enabled through therapy, working through my own mindset stuff and working with a business coach, and got me to where I am now. And finding intuitive eating has been, the best thing for me and for all my clients.
I love that. It's so refreshing to hear someone who can actually admit when the breaking point was. Because I don't know about you, but too often, especially as women, we tend to be shameful and guilty about the habits that we used to have or we do have right now. And as you mentioned, you were working at a job you hated, you were eating a block of chocolate every day, and then one day you're like, what the hell am I doing? Like, why am I doing this? This is not serving me. And it's good that you took that point of making a change, because as we know, change is uncomfortable. It's fucking hard. And too often people are comfortable by their own bad habits that they don't make those changes.
Totally. And I think what you said there early on about the shame, and that was just breeding the whole binge restrict cycle anyway. Like, it was the minute I would finish the chocolate and it's that embarrassment and that guilt of what you've just done, and then thinking that the solution is to cut it out, or to, that chocolate or me was the problem. But it's just this cycle that just traps you a lot.
It literally does. I remember there was a time where I used to hide my block of chocolates from my family, I think.
Oh, yeah.
I reckon I was in like my late teens when I was still at home, and I used to hid my block of chocolates in my cupboard or in my underneath the bed. I'm pretty sure it was crazy just to think about it right now, because I was so shameful about the habits that I was having and the relationship that I had with food. You're hiding it from everyone, trying to make yourself feel a little bit better, but it just didn't.
Oh no, especially when you feel so isolated, and because no one's really having these conversations, to whether it be to your friends, to your family, or just in general, you particularly back then, you just weren't really hearing of that being a struggle, or because there is so much shame and judgment attached to it. And when we are our own worst critics, you get stuck and you don't want to open up the conversation because it's embarrassing. It's not behaviors that you're proud of, and it's not you don't think that there's a way out either. So you
Mm.
don't know where to go when you're in that place.
Yes. Oh, I really love that you mentioned that, how some people think there's no way out. It's just, that old mentality, well, that fixed mindset going, oh, this is me, like take it or leave it. It's such a toxic way of looking at things. When you were wanting to make a change, or when you took that step, you mentioned that you went on to having therapy and then did the whole coaching side of things. What was that transition like for you?
It was hard. Like, I think it got harder before it got easier, especially when you're actually digging deep, and lots of emotions, because I'm a human just like everybody else. And when you actually start to dig into your own shit, it's hard. Like, it didn't get easier straight away, but I think in time there just comes this moment where you can feel the weight off you. And by weight, I don't mean physical weight. I mean just this feeling of lightness, that you have worked through stuff and you're through the other end, and you can see what was fueling and what was triggering all of those behaviors in the first place. And I know for me, I wasn't taught effective coping strategies. So food was such an easy go-to. It's accessible, it's reliable, you know exactly what you're going to get from it. And that's how it kind of, I was emotionally eating. And that's also fueled by the restriction and diet culture pressures that tell you you shouldn't be eating those foods, and you're so much desiring to fit into the thin ideal that we see everywhere. So you've got the two ingredients for the perfect storm of emotional eating.
You made such a good point here about the social media side of things, like the standards of society of how women should be eating, but also your own way of restricting the food that you were eating. And that's a big one. I don't know about you. However, lately I've noticed there's been a lot of food swaps on social media. It's been going on forever. I love how you roll your eyes. For those
Sorry, not at you.
For those who didn't see, Darcie literally just rolled her eyes. And I hope you girls are rolling your eyes as well, because I'm kind of fed up with people posting the swap foods unless they're actually teaching women that you can have both in various, like in moderation. Because for you to swap a chocolate for broccoli or chocolate to an apple, again, it's teaching you a really toxic way of looking at foods. Like, why should chocolate be deemed as bad compared to an apple?
It's infuriating. And I think like my Instagram algorithm has filtered out all the BS out there. So I'm like not really across it all that much anymore. But recently I've started TikTok for my business as well. And oh my goodness, the stuff I see on there as well, I'm just like, is this stuff still around? But yeah, there are some big companies as well that I know are so popular in amongst young women that I do see and that I do come across. And it's just, it infuriates me. And it's just so unhelpful in the way that we view food. And I think we've been taught and conditioned that food is good or bad. And it's just so binary and so unhelpful, because it just teaches black or white when it comes to food, and it's just so much more than that.
100%. It's not teaching the women how to treat their relationship with food in a healthy manner. It's literally just putting more anxiety onto your head, going, oh, well, if I have a chocolate, maybe I should have a broccoli. It's just like, no, like you shouldn't be thinking this way. And this is where it comes really toxic when it comes to a relationship, not only with food, but with a body, because we know there's a correlation between body image and food, especially when it comes to emotional eating.
Totally. And when there's hypervigilance in your body, it creates hypervigilance around food. And this comes in all different shapes and body sizes. And a lot of people can't recognize that, particularly when thinner bodies are deemed as healthy and larger bodies are deemed as unhealthy according to diet culture expectations, that it's just so much more than that. And it's just, it's very problematic. And I think when you're in it, it's really difficult to see. But when you're through the other end, it's very evident of, how dangerous that concept is.
When was that point where you were emotionally eating and you realized, this is, because we mentioned before that you were doing a little bit more with work with your therapist, but also transition more into your coaching side of things. In terms of emotional eating, where did you find yourself most, I guess what I'm trying to say is like where were some points in your life where you found yourself emotionally eating more than others?
That's a good question. What's standing out to me particularly is the time when I was in a job I wasn't enjoying, and I was living, an unbalanced life. I wasn't coping with my emotions at all. So I think that time really stands out to me. I mean, even in recent years, overcoming a bit of my own stuff, there was still emotional eating probably at the start of therapy, and that kind of tied in with the start of COVID and challenges in life anyway, and just different transitions there. Yeah, they're probably the two times that really jump out. But I mean, there was a whole lot of restriction in other periods of my life that, it wasn't necessarily emotional eating, but following those restrictive times was binging. But I don't think that was emotional as such. That was more from a physical and biological stance of, my body needing that energy and food.
But then again, we know that that cause of emotional eating has become an issue because of, the restriction and not restriction around our body, but also stress and the lives that we were living. As you mentioned, you were at a job where you absolutely hated. Hence, when you're stressed and when you're not feeling yourself, of course, we're going to rely on food because food is going to hit that dopamine effect that's going to make us feel better, whether it's chocolate, whether it's chips, whatever that food type is, which obviously puts us a lot into that cycle of binge eating. So when it comes to overcoming those emotional eating, like you're an expert around this, what are some things that you have asked yourself to overcome it?
The emotional eating side, do you mean?
Yeah.
Yeah, I think am I living a balanced life? Like, am I getting my needs met from all aspects? And the way I support clients is helping them build a healthy coping toolkit that deals, distracts, and nurtures their emotions. And I think for me specifically, it's being able to identify and having that awareness piece of when I do feel a certain emotion, even if it is uncomfortable, like what is going to actually serve me here. Sometimes, you know what, sometimes it is food, and sometimes, more often than not, it's not, because it doesn't actually fix anything that's going on. But yeah, that initial short-term gratification that food can bring can be helpful for sure. And I think a lot of people make themselves wrong for that. But I think it's important to acknowledge that it can be helpful. It just doesn't serve you in the long term. So I think just, being able to recognize what emotions are going on and what I'm feeling, whether it be physically or emotionally in my body, and what's going to truly help and either deal, distract, or nurture that specific emotion.
I love that. You mentioned a couple of times around eating certain foods. Was there a particular point in your life where you were following a certain diet where you're like, this is not actually serving me, but you actually thought it was? And now looking back, you're like, I've learned a lot from this.
I don't even know where to start with that question. Yes. And as I mentioned earlier, those restrictive times that I was in, I mean, I did the soup diet, I did the lemon detox diet, I did all sorts of tracking calories. And there's been quite a few. I also worked for a weight loss company as well. That was alongside my studies in my nutrition degree, which all just perpetuates this unattainable, unrealistic way of living and way of eating, which, now I can see is very problematic. But it's funny you say that, because even recently I had a memory come up on my phone of, when it just randomly throws you photos, and it was my before picture of something that I started. I actually don't even remember what that was. And I was the smallest I think I've been, but that was my before picture. And it really made me realize how, like, that benchmark just keeps moving. Like, when is enough? And if weight loss is something that you're pursuing, it's never enough. Like, no matter what body you're in, it's just going to keep moving, and you can't necessarily see it when you're in it, but it was, a very helpful reminder to see, what a space and what a place I was in, and how unhappy I was. Like, that was everything to me at the time. It consumed so much brain space, time, energy, money, like all of the things that just, were so not helping me at the time.
I'm so glad you brought that up. I literally just had a memory of me doing the lemon detox diet. I think I was like 19 and I was like so excited to get it. I was just like, yes, I'm going to lose weight doing this diet. And obviously, for those who don't know, the lemon detox diet, oh my God, I can't even believe we're like actually talking about this right now. But it's literally just you sipping on freaking water, and like I think it was like a mixture of like powder or like some form of gross stuff that you had to eat on the daily, and literally eat absolutely nothing. And of course, you're going to lose weight because you're not getting any form of food inside of you. But hence, once you finish the diet, guess what? You go back to your old habits and you gain the weight. Surprise, surprise. So that's where like that toxic relationship comes with binge eating, because you're restricting yourself all the time. And then once that restriction ends, your body is literally just craving all the foods that you've been neglecting.
Oh, totally. And like, just a couple of other things that come to mind, like the countless meal plans and gym challenges and things that I did as well, the skinny teas. Like, your body needs energy. And this is something that so many people and clients of mine, that they view food as calories to be feared, and they should be, that less is better. But in the long term, physiologically, your body needs that for all the functions that it's doing all of the time that you just don't recognize. But when you're in that mindset, you're just looking at it as food in, food out through exercise. And it's it's a scary place to be, for sure.
Yeah, I totally agree with you. And I'm noticing, there is a shift happening. It has been happening over the last few years, and I'm sure in the next few years it's just going to get better and better. You made a point earlier about how, we did the lemon detox, we did calorie counting, but you also have embraced more the intuitive side of things for your habits and the way you're helping your clients. But we also know that many people don't know how to intuitive eat properly. And when I say properly, it's more engaging with your intuition and having an understanding of the foods that, you can have in moderation, because it's not as if I wake up every morning going, I feel like a chocolate, a block of chocolate for breakfast. It's just like, that's a really stupid idea to, to have in the morning. But you mentioned also that a lot are binge eating on the regular, and you can relate to this, I can relate to this, but they fear the idea of going into intuitive eating, or they fear the idea that it probably just won't work for them.
It's such a common myth that intuitive eating is just eating what you want whenever you want. And for those that are in that binge restrict cycle, because all they want is the foods that they restrict, like, chocolate, chips, lollies, all the things, that they think that that's what they're going to be eating all the time. But when you do the mindset work and you work your way through the principles of intuitive eating, you can start to recognize that your body actually craves the things that it needs as well. So nourishing meals and foods that are satisfying. And when you can incorporate gentle nutrition, which is a key component of intuitive eating, into honoring your cravings and improving your satisfaction with food, all the pieces start to slot nicely together. And by no means is it eating chocolate chips and lollies all day, every day. It's just the complete opposite to what I see. So it's a definite myth, that one. And I think with intuitive eating, for those that don't know much about it, it can appear to be a bit wishy-washy, just like let your body guide you to whatever you eat. It just doesn't, it sounds a bit woo-woo for my understanding.
Hence my point before, like us waking up thinking, oh, I'll just have a block of chocolate. It's just like, it doesn't work that way.
No, not at all. So there are principles to help guide you through that process of, overcoming the diet mentality and making peace with foods. So there is some loose structure in amongst getting to that point where you can eat what you want. But I mean, like you said, the word moderation, which can be helpful for those in the beginning stage, because it's like, you're not just binging, or you're not just eating all those foods all the time, because essentially that doesn't make your body feel good, and that will just go against the whole premise of intuitive eating.
Mm. You mentioned making peace with food, which I think
Mm.
is a huge thing. And especially for women, it's like having that permission for you to, let's say, like the block of chocolate or having a piece of chocolate without giving yourself, the talk going, oh, you're not allowed chocolate this week because you haven't been good, or you didn't train so you don't fucking earn it, that, like, that sort of talk. So I'm sure this is something that comes across a lot with your clients, or even with your own self-talk in the past, where you have restricted chocolate out of your diet, but now you embrace chocolate as it is and giving yourself permission, going, cool, I'm a human fucking being, I'm allowed to have chocolate when I want to have chocolate, and then having that setup to have a healthier mindset around chocolate and food.
Totally. And part of that process, it's probably one of the most difficult steps in anybody's intuitive eating journey, because there is so much fear amongst those foods and the guilt and shame that comes with it. But when you can challenge those food rules, and whether somebody has a specific amount that they only try to allow themselves, or often there is numbers somewhere amongst food rules that we see, and when you can challenge them and fact check and recognize that somebody's actually just made those numbers up,
Mm.
and you get to do it your own way, and doing little experiments. So whether it be like, if somebody has a specific type of chocolate that they particularly fear or feel out of control around, and giving themselves permission in a place that they feel safe and they can be mindful with it, and starting to expose them in time and multiple times as well, to overcome that fear and recognize that actually nothing bad happens. Like, you don't die, you don't gain weight, like, it's just chocolate, and neutralizing that is so key in making peace with those foods.
Such a great point, because that's where true food freedom comes in, and that's the point where you get enough, you're checking in with yourself, and you're like, cool, well, I'm mindful, I'm conscious of the decisions I'm making, but you're not restricting yourself or disconnected from that feeling. And like you said, it's that old diet mentality that a lot of women do fear having chocolate, because whether they didn't earn it, or they think it's way too many calories, or oh my god, fat is the devil. Same with carbs.
Mm.
How often do we come across women who think carbs is no good for them, yet they'll binge on, I don't know, wine, for instance.
Yeah, totally. That was exactly me as well. I used to have like boiled chicken and vegetables for lunch, and then followed by a block of chocolate, and somehow try and justify it. But not exactly the cycle you want to be stuck in. But you said the word disconnected before, and I see that so often, because we are such busy humans and life can be pretty chaotic, that when you are disconnected, whether that be to yourself, to your emotions, or to how your body's feeling and what it's wanting, that disconnected autopilot eating seems to you don't even realize necessarily that you are binging, or what you are putting into your body. Such a common one that I see.
Mm. I literally just had a memory from the other night. I was having dinner with my boyfriend, and he usually puts the TV on, and I don't like watching TV while I have dinner. And he noticed how I just like went all quiet, and I was just like minding my own business. And then he turned the TV off, and he's like, oh, I remember you don't like watching TV while you're eating. I was just like, yeah, babe, you're right. He's like, oh yeah, that's right, because it disconnects us from our body. So I'm like, oh, he's learning really quick. But this is something that a lot of, not just women, men do it as well. That, as you mentioned, the binge eating cycle is not always emotionally, but it also comes from us being disconnected. How often do we go to the movies and we're eating popcorn, yet you get to the bottom of the pack and you're like, holy shit, I've just demolished a whole popcorn. It's just like, yeah, cool, good on you. But were you mindful eating it? Probably not, because you're distracted watching something. And this is where I love, when it comes with working with clients, is making them understand that you have to check in and being mindful of what you have like eating in front of you, because that way you'll feel so much more comfortable and gain so much confidence around the food that you're eating and not fearing it as much.
Totally. I've definitely been someone to get through a whole block of chocolate or bag of chips and be like, who the just ate all my food. Like, you don't even recognize it. It's like this out of body experience. But yes, I've definitely been there. And with that disconnected piece, I don't know how many people in your audience are mums, but I see this a lot as well, like whether they're finishing off their kids' plates or they're, eating their meal while running around, or they're constantly prioritizing everybody else, which of course, you have to keep these little humans alive. But that disconnected eating is very, very common in mums of young ones I see in particular. But yeah, taking a moment, and often like, what's the rush? What's the urgency? It's tied in with this hustle culture that I think is also around, of just like, get things done all the time, be productive all the time. And it's just striving for, again, that unrealistic pressure and unattainable lifestyle that is just not serving you.
It's so true. And it's, to be honest, it doesn't serve us any good around food, because then it teaches us to eat the food on the go. And this is something that I preach to my clients all the time, is like, you need to find time to have your meal. Yes, there's going to be some days where you're going to have to go from one meeting to another and you don't have much time. Then yeah, have that fucking smoothie. Like, I'd rather you have something to eat than completely restricting yourself. We also want to be building that awareness around you having a meal, in a really confined, like, mindful space, instead of you shoving your food down your gob as you're walking or like in between meetings. Because again, that comes back to that disconnection of the body. And with the disconnection, then you do end up binging a little bit more later in the evening because you're so depleted.
Absolutely. And it would be totally naive of us to say, oh, you must eat every meal and every snack mindfully and fully present. Like, again, that's not realistic and not helpful. But if you can even practice one meal a day where you are fully present, you're noticing what you taste, what you smell, how it looks, all of those, engage your senses through that process, and you'll notice the improvement in overall food satisfaction as well. Because if you're constantly eating on the run, shoving your food down and not letting it even touch the sides of your mouth, then yeah, you're not going to be enjoying food. You're not going to be aware of your hunger, fullness cues. You're just, you're on autopilot.
It's so, so true. And living in autopilot does not serve anyone.
Like literally nobody.
Yeah.
So if you can relate, take a moment to check in. Even if you're going to pause this, go check in with yourself.
100%. What are some things that you do for yourself in terms of like checking in, being mindful with your eating?
With eating specifically, it's a good question. I am generally, like, now that my calendar allows me so much more time in my day that I work for myself, and I generally prioritize like a decent breakfast where I can sit and not be at my desk and all of that. Lunch is a little bit more on the go and I kind of just scrape together whatever. But I always make sure that dinner is with my partner, and no TV as well, similar to you. I don't really enjoy that, or no phones as well, much to his dismay. Is that the right word? I'm not sure. But I think just generally meals that I enjoy and taking the time, and even in an environment that feels peaceful. Like, this is so minor and it might sound a little bit silly and frivolous, but like, if the kitchen's messy or there's, life's feeling chaotic, I need to tick some things off first to be able to actually sit and enjoy food. I don't know. That might seem a bit weird to people, but for me, I find that helps a lot.
I think that's so useful because not many people take the time to think about their habits. So, giving them a little bit of tips around that, just again, the whole phone situation. Like, sometimes I find myself where I'll pull a meal up on my dining table and then grab my phone and I'm like, what am I doing? Like, what do I need my phone for right now? It's like, well, I don't need it for anything. Okay, cool. Let's put it aside. Let's just sit here, be in the moment and eat the food. And I'm not going to say that I'm perfect. There's going to be times, there have been many times where I would literally be in a scroll hole while I'm eating food. But then you finish your food and you feel like keep scrolling over, and then you look at your plate, you're like, oh, I'm finished. And that takes you out, like, again, that goes back to what Darcy said. It takes you out of that disconnection from your body, of that experience of you enjoying that meal. And that leads us to eating, wanting to eat more, because your body hasn't registered that, hey, you actually have food right now.
Yeah, totally. Like you're not feeling your fullness. You're not understanding what your body wants and needs. And as well as if we're not getting that satisfaction from our meals, we are more likely to then go looking for that elsewhere. And what that looks like is turning to the reliable things that give you that sorry, my voice, that comfort and that instant gratification, because you're looking for that dopamine hit, and that is like your chocolate and your energy dense foods.
So true. So true. What's another way that you've helped yourself or even your clients just to embrace that mindset? Embracing that, to ditch that diet mindset.
Good question. I've got a couple of things. I think the first one is understanding how food rules and how restriction backfires on your eating. So it often backfires in one of three ways. And we've got what the hell effect. So that might be that you intend to eat a certain way, and if you deviate away from that even slightly, that you then think, what the hell, I've blown it now, and continue to binge. Whether that be that day or you write off the week, something like that. We've also got the forbidden fruit effect, and that is where the foods that you're restricting, which is, often those sugary or energy dense foods, that they become extra desirable because they're off limits and it makes you want them more. And the third one is a last supper eating. So that might look like, oh, I'll start again Monday, and simply that threat of restriction is enough to fuel binging before Monday comes around again. So those three ways are key ways in how food rules and restriction backfire. And I think a lot of people can relate to that, because it leads to this all or nothing with food, which we know to be so unhelpful. So I think acceptance and understanding around how that really causes chaos with your eating is the first tip. Would you agree with that or add anything to that?
100%. I would definitely agree with that, because that all or nothing mentality is what sets us for failure. Because again, it's looking at food as black and white, and we know that's not the right way of looking at food as.
Absolutely. And that kind of leads me to my next point here, is letting go of good or bad language around food, because that is so normalized, and I see that so often. And again, it's obviously still in our social media everywhere, and it's in our language. I hear it all the time, and we know it to be so unhelpful, because it adds this compensating behaviors with our food. So if you've eaten healthily, then, oh, I deserve this chocolate, or it just swings and roundabouts there. So letting go of good and bad language around food, because food is so much more than that. There is no such thing as empty calories or foods that are just a waste because they offer something in some way, shape or form. That would be tip number 2. And tip number 3 would be having the ability to distinguish between weight and health. And this is the mistake that I see so many people make, that they're on their pursuit to eat healthily, but it's disguised as shrinking their body in some way. And having that skill to pinpoint, well, what is this trying to sell me? What is it trying to tell me to do? Does it come back to trying to shrink my body? And I know so many people will be so reluctant to let go of that, and I totally get that. But when that weight loss is forefront of mind, it's going to be setting you up for failure and self-sabotaging in some way, because often weight loss either doesn't happen quick enough, or you're still not enough, or because it's so restrictive, it goes back to those 3 ways that food rules backfire that I mentioned earlier.
It's so relatable. Like point number 2 and 3 kind of work together, because again, like if you're constantly dieting, or if you're constantly in that mindset of, oh, I'm going to start every Monday because you had a binge over the weekend, that cycle is just a continuous flow of that all or nothing mindset. And then also having a really toxic relationship with food by looking at food as good and bad. There's been so many times where I've had clients, and I can totally relate to this with my previous eating habits, like many, many years ago, is eating certain foods because I trained. And if I didn't train, I wouldn't eat those foods. And again, we have to cultivate a better understanding and awareness that food is food. And like you mentioned, every food has a purpose for it, whether it's a nutritional value or whether it's an emotional value, like chocolate. Like obviously we're not going to get all these freaking minerals and vitamins from chocolate unless it's like raw cacao. However,
It tastes like shit.
yeah, it's very bitter for those who, enjoy it. But on a emotional level, on a fun level, on a soul level, everyone fucking loves chocolate. So, but
Yeah.
you holding yourself back, not having chocolate because you're looking at it as a bad food, then yeah, you're just gonna set yourself up for failure.
Absolutely. Like there are soul foods and there are whole foods, and it's about finding the in between and finding that middle ground in what works for you. And some days a little bit of chocolate will work well, other days more chocolate will work well. And there's no one size fits all. No single day looks the same. And if you're constantly making yourself wrong for your food choices, which is in line with those bad foods in inverted commas there, then you're going to be consuming so much brain space, time, and energy, and feeling stuck in that eating experience.
I totally agree with that. I literally had a question that I wanted to ask you. Oh, there we go. On that point of restriction, what was something that you wish you knew back then when you were binge eating and restricting, where you know it now?
Think it kind of ties in with tip number 3 that I said before, and being able to determine the difference between health and a thinner body. I was confused, and even through my nutrition studies, that was not clear. Like we're still learning about BMI, we're still learning about these toxic, unhelpful theories that still perpetuate this idea of being in a smaller body means you'll be healthy, and they're just not the same thing. Like health and thinness are different, and I valued health, so I wish that I could have seen that health was, yeah, more than just chasing to be in a smaller body. And health comes from your behaviors, and we can never assume that someone in a smaller body is healthier than someone in a larger body, because we are all different. We're meant to be different, and that's all part of it. But when I was in the thick of it, I was solely chasing to be in a smaller body.
I can so relate to that, especially around BMI. There was a stage where I was like constantly calculating my weight and my height according to the measurement, not realizing that it was actually doing me no good whatsoever. And it's interestingly enough, because so many people today are still following those metrics, but they don't realize that those metrics are not serving them a purpose, because it's you against a whole wild world, where usually with the BMI calculations, it's usually, calculations from the elderly or the sick. It's not your typical healthy person.
Totally. But we can't even put the onus on people for believing that. Like it is everybody, it's everywhere. It's in our medical industry. It is everywhere, and you cannot escape it. So I understand why people still believe that that's helpful and that that's serving them, but research has changed, and there is just not enough education around the psychology and the behaviors behind food and nutrition and healthy behaviors in general, that's what needs to be the focus, not just the strategy or the tangible thing of, whether that be healthy eating or a body size, because it's just not the case.
100%. And I'm glad that we spoke in terms of point 3 about how, weight loss is not always equivalent to health. And we know that for a fact. And too often women are always striving to be smaller and thinner because that's, perpetuated as healthy in their eyes. But we know that's just leading them to, a roller coaster of binge eating or a really bad relationship with food.
Totally. And it would just if that was true, that would mean that people in smaller bodies are healthy, which what we can't see is the food stress and obsession, or the over-exercise or the still poor body image, even though it might be perceived as non-existent. The, someone might be smoking, and like who knows? You cannot judge somebody's health by what you see, because there is just so much more that's going on behind closed doors that, not only can we not assume, but never should we comment on somebody's weight or body on that note either.
I completely agree with that. And slowly it's changing. I'm realizing that a lot of people are using different type of language when they're complimenting other women or and men as well. It's not just about the way they look, but it's the energy, it's the way they carry themselves. And I think that's leading in a really positive way by changing that language and making people realize, hey, it's not always about the way you look. It could be also about the way you feel.
100%. And the language might seem so minor and insignificant, but it is so powerful. Like, if we're constantly told messages around weight and health, that of course we're going to believe that over time, but we get to reframe that and retrain the way we talk and the way we communicate about health and weight and all of the things, which is so powerful. And it's so good that there is this movement in a direction that is helpful and makes people feel safe and validated and understood, and all the things that we as humans need.
I totally agree with that. It's so freaking true. Yeah, seriously, like not many people, well, not enough people are talking about this. So I'm really glad that we opened this can of worms to make people realize, hey, like if you do have a binge eating issue, it can be fixed. Like there is the light at the end of the tunnel. You're not stuck in this pattern forever. And like we mentioned at the start, people tend to stay in this familiar state because they don't know any different until they start getting uncomfortable and seeking help, like you did and like you do with your clients.
Totally. And not only does it get to change and there is that light at the end of the tunnel, there is nothing wrong with you if you are struggling with that. And that's just the self-blame that I see is not helping in moving forward. Like, you're a human and you can only learn from your experiences and to move in a direction that you want to be and in a way that is, going to be helpful and serve you. So if you are blaming yourself for whether it be nothing working or for being stuck binging or for being a certain body size, not only does those things get to change, but there's nothing wrong with you for going through that stuff. And that negative self-talk isn't going to be helpful.
I love that. Before we wrap up, what is one thing that has helped you change from like that negative self-talk to a little bit more positive?
One thing, it's difficult to pick. I think therapy has probably been the game changer for me there. And that has taught me compassion, which I never had. I was so hard on myself, and I know that so many other people are, because we are our own harshest critics. But that compassion piece, and that's something that I support clients with as well, rather than making yourself wrong and blaming yourself. It's about understanding and really removing yourself from the situation. Like, how would you talk to someone else that came to you with those problems? And that sounds a little bit cliche, and it's so but it's used so commonly for a good reason, because it allows you to get outside of your own self and your own mind. So I think that's probably been the key thing for me, through therapy and learning with that self-compassion piece.
I love that. Therapy has helped me immensely as well. And so coaching and just doing your own research and experiments, you're going to be your best student by realizing what works and what doesn't work. And, for our coaches out there seeking help, or for women, seeking help is not something to be fearful of. It's actually going to help you grow a little bit better. Like Darcie said, certain therapists or even coaches and mentors will be able to point out exactly what you're doing without you being aware of it.
Totally. And I just realized I should have added the value of my coach as well. I work with a coach on a one-to-one level, and it has been an absolute game changer in allowing me to be human and learning from my mistakes or what's not working, to be able to act and move forward in ways that do and break free of the mindset blocks. And patterns that I was so stuck in to, yeah, keep growing and keep moving forward.
I love that. And that's the goal. That the goal is to keep moving forward and succeeding, whatever that looks like for everyone.
Totally. And everybody's on their own journey to something. And if you struggle with your relationship with food, I hope this has been helpful to see how and that it is possible to move forward in when you have the right strategy and support in place, because that's what it's all about, finding someone that can hold you and make you feel heard, validated, and understood, like I mentioned earlier, so that you can get out of your own way.
Yeah, 100%. Well, for those who are wanting, help around binge eating and to beat it, how can they find you? How can they work with you?
Yeah, so I'm on Instagram, Darcie, DARCIE Ellen, ELLEN nutrition. And I'm also on TikTok, but I'm just starting there. So go give me some love on that. And I offer free discovery calls for new clients where we just chat about food struggles, what's going on for you, and how I can support you overcoming binging and eating healthily and peacefully.
I love that. Well, girls, get on board. Like I know I freaking would, that's for sure. Well, girls, thank you again for tuning in. I hope today's episode has been very helpful for all of you. If it has, please share it, recommend it, screenshot it, tag us at the Women's Fitness Academy, tag Darcie, tag myself. And then till next time, know that there's hope to beating binge eating and finding that food freedom that you deserve.
Thank you so much, Sid.